Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something, well, pretty fundamental for secure, decentralized networks. How do you get a bunch of separate parties to work together, say, sign off on transactions without giving any one party the whole secret key? Because, that's a huge risk.
It really is. It's that classic single point of failure problem. So yeah, today we're digging into a combination of techniques, distributed key generation, DKG, and BLS signatures. We're using the SKALE documentation as our main source material here.
Right, and the idea is to unpack this. It can sound pretty technical, but we want to show you how these pieces fit together to solve that core problem group action without one person holding all the cards, especially how SKALE uses it.
Exactly. It's about achieving that collective security, that cryptographic agreement, while making sure the actual secret is spread out. So even if some participants aren't trustworthy, the system holds up.
Okay, let's dive in then. First things first, distributed key generation. What is it really, and why do we even need it?
Well, think about it like setting the foundation. You've got your network, maybe invalidators, right? And they need to collectively hold a key pair, a public key everyone knows, and a secret key for doing important stuff, like signing blocks. But like you said, you absolutely cannot just have one validator hold that secret key.
Yeah, because if they get hacked or just decide to go rogue.
Poof, the whole security model collapses. So DKG is the algorithm the group runs together to generate that key pair. No single party creates it. The result: one public key everyone agrees on, and the secret key. Well, it never actually exists in one complete form.
Okay, hang on. If the secret key never exists, where is it? How does it work?
It's distributed, split up. Each of those man parties gets a unique share of the secret key. And by itself, one share is basically useless to an attacker. The clever part is the threshold security. It's designed to be, say, insecure.
Meaning it can handle up to bad actors.
Exactly. Up to team participants can be offline or malicious, and the system still works securely. And crucially, to reconstruct the full secret key, which you generally don't want to do, you'd need more than 10 of those shares.
How many more?
Typically T plus 1. So you need T plus 1 shares. Even if a team attackers collude and prove their shares, they still can't get the group's main secret. Later, when they need to sign something, you need at least 10 plus 1 honest participants to contribute their part of the signature. But again, they do that without ever putting the full key back together.
Okay, concept makes sense. Split the secret. Need a threshold to do anything. But how do they physically or digitally do that? How does the group actually generate these shares securely?
Right, it's a process, usually a few rounds of communication. Each participant, let's call them a player, starts by generating their own secret value. Think of it mathematically as a secret polynomial of degree t. The constant term of this polynomial, like P0, is their individual secret contribution.
Okay, polynomials. Why degree t?
Because of a fundamental property. You need exactly t plus 1 points to uniquely define or reconstruct a polynomial of degree t. That 10 plus 1 is the same threshold we just talked about.
Got it. So they have their secret polynomial. What next? They can't just broadcast that, right?
No, definitely not. The goal is to prove you have a valid secret contribution without revealing it. So what they do is they take their secret polynomial and map its coefficients onto points on an elliptic curve using a known generator point g. This creates a public polynomial, like a commitment. They broadcast this public version to everyone.
So like a public shadow of their secret.
Kinda, yeah. It commits them to their secret without revealing it. Then, using their secret polynomial, each player computes a specific value, pj, for every other player j in the group. These are the secret key contributions, and they send pj privately and directly only to player j.
Okay, so I create my secret polynomial, broadcast the public version derived from it, and then calculate a unique secret value for you based on my secret and send it just to you. And you do the same for me, and everyone else does it too.
Precisely. Everyone generates secrets, broadcasts public commitments, and then distributes personalized secret pieces to everyone else.
Okay, now, what if someone cheats, sends garbage data, or just doesn't send their contribution? How do you check this stuff, and what happens if someone complains?
Good question. That's vital. Verification happens next. When you receive a secret contribution pj from player I, you also have player I's public polynomial commitment they broadcast earlier. You could use a mathematical check involving that elliptic curve mapping again to verify if the secret value pj they sent you is consistent with their public commitment.
And I can do that check without knowing their actual secret polynomial.
Exactly. It verifies they calculated your piece correctly based on the secret they committed to. Now, if a player doesn't send you pj in time, Or if the PJ you receive fails this verification check, then you, the recipient, make a complaint.
Okay, a complaint. How does Scale handle that? Does the whole network get involved?
This is a really interesting part of Scale's design. In some traditional DKG setups, yeah, the complaint and the data might be broadcast publicly for everyone to check. But that can sometimes leak information or open up attacks. Scale does it differently. It uses the SKALE Manager contract deployed on the Ethereum mainnet.
Right, Scale Manager on Ethereum. Why use Ethereum for this?
It leverages Ethereum's, very high security and finality for this crucial dispute step. When you complain, the relevant data goes to the SKALE Manager. The manager contract itself performs the verification check. If it confirms the player was malicious or salty,
Then what?
then that faulty player gets slashed. They lose a portion of their staked SKALE tokens. It's a strong economic disincentive. And then typically the DKG process restarts, potentially without the slash node.
Ah, so the economic stick ensures honesty, and using Ethereum provides a secure, trusted referee, basically. And it avoids broadcasting potentially sensitive complaint data within the Scale network itself.
Exactly. Scale needs a way to reliably identify and remove bad actors to maintain the integrity of its validator sets, so this approach fits their model well. It addresses specific vulnerabilities you might see in other purely internal complaint systems.
Okay, so let's say we got through that. Contributions sent, verified, maybe a bad actor got slashed and removed, DKG restarts. Eventually, everyone has valid contributions from everyone else. How do these combine into the final group keys?
Right, the group keys. The public key is pretty straightforward. You essentially just combine, mathematically add all the individual public polynomial commitments that everyone broadcasted. The result is the group's public polynomial, and its constant term is the group's overall public key. Everyone can compute this. It's public.
Okay, simple addition of the public parts. Makes sense. What about the secret side? How do I get my share of the group secret?
Remember all those private, secret contributions, PJ, you receive from everyone else? To get your personal share of the group's secret key, you just sum up all those valid contributions you received. Everyone does this calculation locally.
So my final secret share isn't directly from my original secret polynomial, but it's the sum of what everyone else correctly computed for me based on their secrets.
That's exactly right. And the mathematics behind the polynomial scheme ensures that your resulting share is a point on the group's secret polynomial. The group's overall secret key is conceptually the constant term of that group polynomial, the sum of everyone's original secret constant terms. While no one holds that full group secret, having all plus one of these individual shares allows the group to collectively act as if they have it.
Fantastic. So DKG gives us the distributed key shares, secure, robust. Now, how do we actually use them efficiently? To sign blocks or transactions or whatever the group needs to do, that's where BLS comes in, I gather.
Precisely. Having distributed keys is step one. Step two is using them effectively. And BLS signatures, that's Boneh-Lynn-Shacham, are, well, particularly great for this scenario.
Why BLS? What makes them special?
They have a few really nice properties. They're quick to verify, they're small, compact in size, and the killer feature for groups. They are aggregatable.
Aggregatable. Okay, that sounds like the key. What does that actually let you do?
It's a massive win for efficiency. Let's quickly touch on a single BLS signature first. You have your private key X. The public key is XG on the curve. You take the message M, hash it to a point H on the curve, and your signature is basically X key H. Verifying involves a special math operation called a bilinear pairing. E, you check if E signature, G equals E, H public key. The pairing makes this check work, and it's efficient.
Okay, special math pairing, it lets you verify one signature easily. Now the aggregation part.
Right. This is where the magic of that pairing E really shines for groups. It has this property, essentially EAB plus C equals EABEAC. Because of this, if you have, say, 100 different validators, all signing the exact same message with their own BLS keys.
You'd normally have 100 separate signatures to check.
You would, which means 100 verification operations, storing 100 signatures. It adds up. With BLS aggregation, you can just mathematically add all 100 individual signatures together. You combine them into one single short aggregate signature S.
One signature from 100.
Yeah. And then anyone verifying only needs to perform one slightly modified pairing check involving this aggregate signature S and all the individual public keys, or an aggregate public key. This single check validates that all the original 100 signatures were valid,
Wow. So for a block signed by many validators, the network basically just sees and checks one compact piece of data.
That's the power of it. Huge savings on bandwidth, storage space on the blockchain, and computation needed for verification. It's incredibly efficient for consensus mechanisms or anything requiring many parties to attest to the same thing. And yeah, BLS signatures are typically shorter than other common types like ECDSA anyway.
Okay, this is clearly where DKG and BLS fit together perfectly then. The DKG process creates the distributed key shares.
Which are essentially the distributed BLS private key shares, yes. Let's say your share corresponds to a value Fi, derived from the group's secret polynomial Fox.
And BLS provides the mechanism to use these shares collectively.
Exactly. So when the group needs to sign a message M, each participating validator, E, uses their secret share Fi to compute a signature share. Think of it as HM, raised to the power of Fi, working with points on the curve.
So I create my piece of the signature using my piece of the secret key.
Correct. Now, here's the crucial link back to the DKG math. If you collect enough of these individual signature shares, remember the threshold, T plus one of them.
Right, need T plus 1.
You can combine these T plus 1 signature shares using a technique called polynomial interpolation in the exponent.
Okay, this sounds fancy again. What does that do? What's the result?
The result is what matters. Absolutely. By mathematically combining these T plus 1 shares using interpolation, specifically Lagrange interpolation principles applied in the exponent, you compute a single final value. And this final value is mathematically identical to a valid BLS signature on message M that would have been produced using the entire group's secret key, FIM.
The group's secret key that nobody actually possesses in full.
Precisely. You generate the group's signature, verifiable with the group's public key, without ever reconstructing the group's secret key. The shares stay separate, the main secret stays distributed and safe, but the group can still act collectively and efficiently, produce that final aggregatable signature. It's really elegant.
That is elegant. You get the security of distribution via DKG and the efficiency and collective action via BLS and this interpolation trick.
That's the core mechanism in action. It combines the best of both worlds.
Okay, it sounds robust, but, attackers are always looking for cracks. Are there known ways to attack systems like this using DKG and DLS? And specifically, what does the SKALE source material say about how they defend against potential issues?
Yeah, absolutely. You always have to consider attack vectors. The source mentions a few. One relates to the specific DKG protocol SKALE uses, which is a variant of Joint-Feldman. In its, let's say, classic form, Joint-Feldman can be vulnerable during the complaint phase. If a malicious player, Alice, forces an honest player, Bob, to complain, the traditional protocol might involve broadcasting some justification data related to Alice's contribution. Another malicious player, Charlie, could potentially observe this broadcasted data and use it to subtly influence or bias his own contribution in a later round, potentially compromising the randomness or security of the final shared key.
So the act of complaining itself could leak info that helps an attacker.
In that standard setup, potentially yes. But SKALE avoids this. Remember how complaints are handled?
Off-chain, by the SKALE Manager on Ethereum.
Exactly. Because the verification happens there, the sensitive justification data isn't broadcast across the SKALE network participants. So that specific information leakage vector needed for the bias attack just isn't present in SKALE's implementation. It makes Joint-Feldman, which is relatively lightweight, a secure choice for them because of this external check.
Right, the Ethereum layer plugs that hole. Smart. Are there other attacks to worry about?
Well, there's a theoretical attack called a subgroup attack. This gets into the nitty-gritty math of the elliptic curves used. Essentially, an attacker tries to inject values from a different, smaller mathematical subgroup into their contributions. If enough attackers, maybe T1 of them, collude and do this successfully, they might be able to make the final group public key invalid or predictable in some way.
Sounds nasty. How does SKALE prevent that?
It comes down to the specific curve parameter SKALE chose and the size of the network. The smallest bad subgroup on the curve they use is actually very large. The source mentions its order something like 1769. The number of validators in the SKALE network is, much, much smaller than that.
So you'd need more malicious validators than even exist in the whole network to pull off the attack.
Pretty much, yeah. The scale of the network compared to the mathematical properties of the curve makes this specific attack practically impossible for SKALE.
Okay, math saves the day there. Any other tricky ones mentioned, like timing attacks?
Yes, there was a potential vulnerability related to timing, sometimes called a front-running attack in this DKG context. Imagine a malicious node is supposed to send data to an honest node. It deliberately holds back. The honest node waits, doesn't receive it, and eventually sends a complaint to the SKALE Manager, just as that complaint transaction is about to be processed on Ethereum.
The malicious node quickly sends the data.
Exactly. It front-runs the complaint. If it timed it right, the manager might see the data arrive just before processing the complaint, making it look like the honest node complained falsely. The risk was the honest node could get slashed by mistake.
Ouch, how did they fix that?
The source indicates this was addressed by implementing very strict time slots for broadcasting the DKG messages and for submitting complaints. You have a specific window to send your data, and a specific window after that to complain if you didn't receive it. This rigid timing structure prevents that kind of last-minute data submission aimed at framing an honest participant. They also mentioned looking into threshold encryption as a future enhancement for even more robustness against timing issues.
Right, we've covered a huge amount today. We started with that basic but critical problem. How do you get group security without a single point of failure holding the master key?
And we saw how DKG tackles that head-on, splitting the secret into shares, needing that tip+1 threshold for security.
Then we brought in BLS signatures, seeing how incredibly efficient they are, especially that aggregation feature turning many signatures into one.
Yeah, and the real beauty was seeing how they combine. DKG provides the distributed shares, and then using those shares with polynomial interpolation lets the group create a valid BLS signature for the whole group without ever putting the master secret back together.
And finally, we looked at some real-world attack scenarios, the Joint-Feldman issue, subgroup attacks, front-running, and saw how Scale's specific design choices, particularly leveraging the SKALE Manager on Ethereum, aim to mitigate those threats.
Exactly. Hopefully walking through this source material gives you a much clearer sense of the clever cryptography needed to make these decentralized systems work securely and efficiently.
Yeah, you've definitely got a better handle now on secret shares, those polynomial tricks, bilinear pairings, signature aggregation, and why careful protocol design and considering attack vectors is so important. So here's something to chew on as we wrap up. Scale made a deliberate choice to use an external, highly secure chain Ethereum for handling DKG disputes via the SKALE Manager. Think about how that reliance on an external system might shape your trust assumptions about Scale's security model compared to, say, a hypothetical network that tries to handle all its cryptographic disputes entirely within its own internal consensus, which might be newer or less proven. Where does the trust ultimately lie? Something to consider.